Thank you for inviting me to speak. I've been asked to talk about, my adventure into neuroscience, which started about 6 years ago. Before it happened, I had no real interest in science or any real understanding of how the human brain works. I used to be a documentary producer, just producing films about other people's lives, but not my own. But I was always fascinated about narrative expression and storytelling. And one day, almost exactly 6 years ago, I was living by myself in Shoreditch, and I woke up with an excruciating but very strange, unfamiliar pain in my head. And it was dark. It was a Sunday night, and I just I faced a really big problem, but I couldn't quite work out what it was. What was happening was that my brain had begun to hemorrhage. I was experiencing an unprovoked intercerebral bleed. But because this had already started happening, I wasn't able to make sense or put any logic into my experience. I was looking at my phone. I had a sense that it could help me, but I had no idea how a phone worked. I looked at clothes. I knew that they were functional tools, but I didn't know how to put them on. And I was having this terrible pain, and then it would subside, and I think I was sort of passing in and out of consciousness. But somehow, some sort of force of will allowed me to kind of cling to life. And at some point during the early hours, I remember this because it was light, I had this sudden moment of logic. Suddenly I was able to put my clothes on, walk out of the door and walk down 4 flights of stairs into the street and across the street into a hotel where I was planning to ask for help. But when I started to speak, nothing came out. And I think they just thought I was a crazy drunk person, which there were quite a few in Shoreditch. So I think I sort of scrambled into the bathroom and lost consciousness again. And somebody called an ambulance. And the next thing I recall was 2 days later, I was sort of taken out of an induced coma with some surgery to the left side of my brain. And just this sense of complete silence and peace with no kind of no history, no future, no intellect, just sort of free, I guess now I would call it, in hindsight, a pure freedom of just being alive. But when I started to understand slowly over those first 2 weeks in hospital that there was something terribly wrong, I kept being assessed by doctors, and all my friends from all over the world had come to see me, and I got the sense that I'd survived something and something big had happened. And I'd lost the ability to read and write and speak and to think in a coherent way. I'd lost my vision on the right of my periphery, and the world sounded and looked completely different to the one I'd left behind. I wasn't able to tune out perception. Visual perception was kind of distorted. Sounds and images were completely different and kind of augmented. And so I, obviously, as a storyteller, I was fascinated by this crazy, beautiful, terrifying new dimension. And I wanted to make a movie about it, but I couldn't even use my phone. So somebody gave me my phone back in those first 2 weeks in the hospital, and I spent hours and hours sort of trying to figure out how it worked. I wanted to record this new reality, and I wasn't able to retain information. Basically, I wasn't able to remember stuff initially. So I wanted to use the tools that I knew my phone would be able to help me with in order to retain this new reality. And so, I kind of relearned how this very simple video function works on the phone, and I just started to record absolutely everything, because I just thought it all looked and felt incredible, and I wanted to share it. Another thing was, because I wasn't able to communicate clearly, I used the phone to help me record messages for friends, and then friends would record messages back. I did regain some of my abilities. I'm still not really able to read properly, and my brain and my the linguistic part of my brain is permanently sort of changed. But I do still, basically I still have these sort of hours and hours of video footage, and I started collaborating with a woman that I'd met just about a month before the brain hemorrhage. She was someone who'd done lots of science programs for the BBC, and I like in my crazy delusional state in the hospital, I knew that this woman could help me, but I wasn't able to find the words to figure out how to get in touch with this lady. But through the forces of magic and help, she appeared at my bedside, and we kind of made this story together. So the first three, we used all those early videos that initially just been sort of communications with friends as the kind of the beginnings. Well, actually, the kind of the tool to tell this story, and so the first 3 months I spent. After I was taken out of the hospital and the bits of my brain were pulled out, and I was kind of, I was put into a neurological rehabilitation unit for 3 months. And this place was supposed to make me feel better, but the more time I spent there, the more assessments I had, the more measurements about the reductions in my abilities and my intellect, in my neural function, the more kind of strange and disconnected from myself and depressed, frankly, I felt. I came out feeling even more like a shell that just wanted to fall face down into a puddle than ever. And but I kept just recording everything, and I had in my mind this idea: I'm making a film, and we're doing a project, a creative project, and I had this kind of innate sense that I was regaining the ability to tell a story just by recording and using this kind of the memory bit of my brain to capture this new world. And then I was invited by some experimental neuroscientists at the Institute of Neuroscience in Queen's Square here in London to do a first-time experiment using direct currents to the freshly kind of revolutionized bit of my brain. And I said, sure. So they were going to zap my brain with electrodes for a month to try to get the language part to recover more quickly than was currently happening. So I did sign up for this experiment in the hope that I'd go back to my old self, because that's what I kept being told by the team of people that were trying to help me. Will get you back to who you were before. And the more they said it, the more distant I felt from that person. And it's just a very distressing reminder. And at the end of that month of experimentation, I had a huge seizure and was back in hospital, back several steps in my recovery, and just really terrified that something horrible was going to happen again. And I decided to stop looking outwards for solutions and realized that there was only one place to turn, and that was within myself, to find who that lost creature was and to find some new abilities where the old ones had disappeared. So that's what I started doing. So David Lynch and me became pals during this process. Basically, I had in my head at the beginning of the recovery, I just kept thinking, David Lynch would know exactly what I'm talking about. I need to find him. But I never really thought that I would, and all my friends and family just thought, just like go with it. But I was recording him these kind of imaginary messages on my iPhone, like imagining that I was speaking to him. And, a few steps further, those messages actually reached him, and he wrote back, and he just loved them. He loved my brain, he loved my story, and he loved the project and wanted to become the executive producer of the film. And again, fast-tracking a couple of years, we had the premiere of the first version of the film, and Netflix came to that premiere, and they were also enamoured by the whole thing and bought the film off me, which was great, because it gave it a global platform. And what had started to feel like a very self-absorbed project suddenly had this huge reach, and all of these people from around the world who had experienced similar brain injuries, or sometimes nothing to do with their brains, but sudden transformations in their lives, had found solace in this story. And suddenly I realised what the point of the film had been.